And so we don't always understand what is actually going on underneath that. Is it feelings of embarrassment, stress, nervousness, exhaustion, annoyed? And us as parents can relate to this as well when sometimes we're angry with our children. Let's figure out, okay, well, what is actually under that iceberg? What is actually the real cause of this? And when we know what causes the anger, what's the root of our anger, it'll help us to be more understanding, compassionate, and forgiving of each other. This, to me, when I found this was a light bulb moment for me. So I thought I'll share it with you as well. The Bible talks a lot about anger, but when angry with our sibling, friend, or church member, let's stop ourselves in our tracks and wonder what the cause of anger could be. And remember what James tells us in chapter 1, verse 19 to 20. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be what? Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. So quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. I love the wisdom Bible gives us, don't you? See, I went one ahead. Another scenario similar to what we might hear sometimes is mummy's boy or daddy's girl. But again, this story that I'm going to be talking about next is between two brothers. Guess who it is? If you didn't see that slide, twins. They even used fighting. They were even fighting in their mother's womb before they were born. Who do you think they are? Esau and Jacob. Yes, Jacob versus Esau. So in this story, it isn't uncommon for siblings to fight for their parents' attention and love, as well as how some older siblings have a desire to be more dominant over their younger siblings. In this case, God had made it clear that Esau, the older sibling, would serve Jacob and that Jacob was the chosen one. Yet their father, Isaac, chose to bless Esau, and Jacob's mother arranged for Jacob to receive the blessing by deceit. Esau was clearly his father's favorite due to his strength at hunting, and Jacob's great attachment was to his mother. It took over 20 years for these two brothers to reconcile. What lesson can we learn here? In this situation, the siblings' parents weren't very helpful in making sure the brothers got along. They were quite at fault in this situation, reminding us that parents have a role to play in tempering sibling rivalry. While Esau said terrible things and Jacob played his part in his mother's deceit, we learn that sibling rivalry and the harsh things we say to our brothers and sisters can be overcome. While it took a long portion of their lives for them to reconcile, it is possible to grow closer as we grow up. Now, the third scenario, I guess if you can choose this one, I'm going to call it playing favorites. This brother was the second youngest of 12 brothers. He was his dad's favorite. His dad even made a special coat for him, and not the other brothers. He would often tattletale on his brothers to his dad. All his 10 older brothers hated him. You have to know who this is. I gave you many, many clues. So Joseph versus his brothers. As that's found in Genesis 37, if you want to read about it more. So Joseph's story is rather well known and another strong example of sibling rivalry. Jacob showed a great deal of favoritism towards his son, Joseph, because he was born of Jacob's favorite wife, Rebekah. Joseph's brothers clearly saw that their father loved Joseph more, especially after he gave Joseph that beautiful, extravagant robe. This created conflict between Joseph and his brothers to where they shunned him and then considered murdering him. They would not even call him their brother. In the end, they sold him into slavery. It didn't even help the two wives of Jacob, who were also sisters, were jealous of each other. Another example of sibling rivalry there. When Joseph spoke to his brothers, he somewhat taunted them about his dreams and showed them how they would bow down to him in the end, though the brothers were reunited and all were forgiven, although again it took many years and tribulation to get there. Again, what's the lesson here? One would think that Joseph would have learned to show favoritism, but sometimes people can be a little blind to their own actions. So again, the parent played a part in fueling the fire of sibling rivalry. Still, this story is an example of how it takes two to have a rivalry. The other brothers weren't very nice to Joseph and blamed him for his father's mistake. Yet Joseph wasn't exactly understanding, and he was a bit of a taunter and tattler. Both sides were wrong, and it didn't take time to understand each other. However, in the end, and after much trial and tribulation, again, the brothers reconciled. James 2 verse 1 says, "My brothers, show no partiality as you hold faith in your Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory." Is there a favorite in your family and you're not it? You know the pain of being sidelined. Perhaps you watched a sibling get special treatment, singled out for praise, showered with love and gifts, or were you left to live in the shadows to enjoy whatever crumbs came your way? It's hard to know which is worse, parents who do it and deny they do it, or those that boast about their favorites. The next scenario. The world revolves around me, I'm going to call it. These two brothers were very much loved by their father. The younger brother wanted to leave home and have a great time. The other one, who was responsible, stayed at home to look after the land and his dad. Good. No, the prodigal son. Okay, so the story, the father had two sons. The eldest son is well behaved. He does what he's told and takes care of things at home. He's responsible and respects the way he was raised. The younger son is less so. It's usually with second-borns, isn't it? But he is more rebellious and soon asks his father for money so he can leave home. While out in the world, he parties away all the money. Soon the younger son realizes the error of his ways, and tired of all the partying, he returns home where his father is overjoyed. He throws the younger son a party and makes it a great big deal. Yet, the older son resents the attention, blasting his father for never honoring him after all these years of obedience. The father reminds the older son that all he has is his and at his disposal. So the lesson here, while the story of the prodigal son is a parable, it does provide us with actual lessons in sibling rivalry. It reminds us that we can sometimes get too far into our own heads, too self-absorbed, and we need to remember that what others may be going through. We need to show unconditional love and not always to be concerned about ourselves. The older brother in the story was being petty and not very welcoming to his brother that finally returned to the family. Of course, that is something to be celebrated. The father had to remind him that the brother had always been there and that he had access to everything the father had. That was, in its own way, a lifelong celebration and commitment. And is also a reminder that family love needs to be unconditional. Yet the younger brother made mistakes, he hurt them, but he's still the brother of the family. That's not fair, I'm going to title the next scenario. The next story this time is about two sisters. The older one, who was the responsible one, she loved to serve by doing things. The younger one was more the relational one, and when a special visitor came to the house, she sat at his feet. While the older one worked really hard around and got upset because her younger sister wasn't helping her. Who am I talking about here? Sorry? Yes. So Mary and Martha were sisters living in Bethany, living on the outskirts of Jerusalem. When Jesus arrived, Mary sat at his feet, listening to his every word. Whenever someone sits at one's feet, it symbolizes acknowledgement of his or her authority. It is possible that Jesus was there for a meal and was reclining at his side of the table. In that case, Mary would have been literally sitting at his feet. As hostess, Martha was very distracted, making sure everything was just perfect for her guest. This would have been a typical expectation for a woman, especially one who was head of the household in the first century. When Martha asked Jesus if he cared that Mary had left her alone to do all the serving, she phrased the question in a way that indicated she expected him to say, "Yes, I care." She continued by asking to tell Mary to help her. This would not have been appropriate request. As a guest, Jesus should not have been asked to settle a family dispute. Jesus rarely answered the question that were put to him. Rarely he used them for teachable moments. Rather, he used them for teachable moments. In this case, he said to Martha and Mary had chosen the good part and that it should not be taken away from her. Yet, by saying, "Martha, Martha," Jesus indicated great tenderness and concern for Martha. The lesson here, so many times we're asked to do chores and we complain, knowing that the chores need to be done, yet we feel it's unfair and unjust treatment. There's two approaches to the gospel mission. The one is to get out and do it. The other is to sit and learn, which will then equip us to go out and do it. This should encourage us to accept and respect our different needs and responsibilities. Both sisters were doing the right thing, yet need to respect each other's calling, position, and choices. So now I'm going to choose a story. I'm going to tell you a story about something a little bit closer to our generation, the story of Rudolph and Adolf, or I'll call them Rudy and Addie. This story began in 1924 in the small town of Herzogenaurach, where Addie and Rudy decided to embark together on a business adventure that unfortunately would end up destroying their brotherly love.